Hi guys. I'm sure I'm going to trust you, Thomas, to just cut me off when my time is up, because I can sure as hell ramble if you need me to. So this webinar has actually been in the works for months, I would say, for months. And I thought, when Bipolar UK first came to me to ask if I wanted to be a part of it, I thought, all right. I mean, I don't think my spend is an issue, but I'm sure I can. And then over this last year, I've seen that my spending is an issue. So it's really been a learning curve for me. And what's really interesting, and I don't want this to come across as Mother Teresa, or however you'd want to describe it, but I realized that my biggest spending issue is on others. I personally scrutinize everything I spend personally on myself. And then when I was younger, I struggled with eating and control, because food was the only thing I actually had control over when I was undiagnosed. So it took me 12 years to be diagnosed. So at the fun age of 21, when I was supposed to be going out and having, the time of my life, I was in Sainsbury's, walking down the aisles, calling my mum, being like, can I eat this? Can I eat this? But also, can I pay for this? But this is a treat. So what should I do? So that's when I knew it was starting. And with that in mind, I started separating my money at that point. And my parents would be the first to say that I'm very good with money. Again, not like humble brag, but because they taught me to be good with it. And I was in McDonald's at the age of 16. So they put that work ethic in me. But in order to manage my money, I put it into separate pots. And this actually became incredibly vital when I hit adulthood, and in particular now, because I moved country last year. So I've got a whole brand new bank account, but I still have everything in the UK. And it was very overwhelming at one point, because when you're in a new country, and I'll come on to this, when you're in a new country, not only are you setting up a brand new life, but you're trying to meet people and make friends. So what I found really useful is Monzo, is from anyone in the UK, or if you're in America, it is Venmo. I don't know why they couldn't have just joined forces, but here we are. And I will separate my money so specifically, it's kind of embarrassing. And one of the pots that I do have is a Christmas pot. And throughout the year, I'll just throw a tenner here, a tenner there, and watch that build, because one of my biggest pleasures is Christmas. And that is my time when I get to shower my parents with gifts. And every year they're like, no, you haven't got the money this year. And I'm like, no, this is what brings me joy. And I was thinking about that. And I realized, as I said, that my biggest Achilles heel is spending money on others. And I think that's a combination of buying love, buying friendships, when I'm dating, just again, buying love. And then also at the same time, I've always been quick to jump in and be like, I'll just cover this, so there's no awkwardness. And with that awkwardness, actually hand in hand, is the feeling of, I owe these people because I've been a burden. So let me just get this. So that's something I've definitely learned, and some great examples of this, guys. We shot a film. I'm an actor and producer, probably should have prefaced that. Also, my name's April. I didn't really introduce myself at all. And we shot a film in LA. And then my co-star, who lives in LA, we had our premiere. And it was at a big film festival. It was at BFI. And I was like, I have to fly this person over. And they were like, no, it's okay. Like, I will, like, I'll split the ticket. And before they even knew, I'd like bought the ticket, transfer them the money. Like, I'd done it all. And I wonder, I'd be interested, Leah, if you think this as well, but I love a surprise. So and 9 times out of 10 you need a bit of money for a surprise. So I surprised that actor, flew them over. I changed my flights last Christmas to fly back and surprise my parents. I didn't think I was going to be able to go on a hen do in Ibiza, and just showed up. Like, I don't know why I do that. Other things, Jaeger bombs. I have been known to buy an entire bar Jaeger bombs because I'm the queen of Jaeger bombs. Most recently, Taylor Swift tickets. Anyone else? Anyone else spend Taylor Swift tickets? I couldn't get normal tickets, and I got it in my head, and I think there is this, and Thomas, I'm sure you're going to join the dots beautifully, of this overspending and obsession, and they come hand in hand. And I just was like, I have to go. I just, come hell or high water, I have to go. Partly because it's history, like we're watching history happen with what this woman's doing, and partly because all my friends were going. So there was then the only child in me, the brat, was like, I have to go if they're going to go. So to conclude, obsessed, overspending, and brat is what the combination was that made me spend £599 per ticket on 2 tickets to see Taylor Swift. Oh, 123 people are on now. I thought it was only like 77. So judge me as you will. And then I kind of woke up the next day sober. I mean, like, why did I do that? I don't have the money to do that. And then I realized that I overspend and spend my money on memories, on making memories, rather than materialistic things. So again, and just thinking about this and the web that it causes, I think, right, well, I'm spending money on people because that makes them happy, and then that creates a memory. And I was brought up to believe that people will always remember how you make them feel. And then there's that famous Robin Williams quote, which, guys, if you can find the Robin Williams quote and then can say it, that'd be great. So I don't differ, don't get distracted, is what I mean. And oh God, I distracted myself by saying don't get distracted. What does that mean, Thomas? Dr. Thomas?
You were talking about Robin Williams. I'm not sure what quote you're referring to.
It's the... Wait a minute. Robin. We're doing it, guys. We're doing it.
All right. And yeah, I have bought Taylor Swift tickets for my daughter, but she doesn't know that yet. It's a birthday present. Not the £600 ones, though. I didn't go that far.
599. Have some respect, please. So the quote is, and this is what always plays in my mind when I'm just spending money on people, is, I think the saddest people always try their hardest to make people happy because they know what it's like to feel absolutely worthless, and they don't want anyone else to feel like that. That sums it up. That really, really does. And my parents are kind of supportive in that. I'm not going to lie. Like, they've had to get me out of hot water. And when I was younger, we realized what the diagnosis was, that there were certain areas where I'd need help. So they would ring fence some of my money. And what they do, which is completely invaluable, is listen to me go through my bank account. So I'm like, so in this pot I have this, and then in this pot I have this, but what I've done is move money over here so I can cover my credit card, and then I can do this. I'm like, they don't know what to do with that. They don't need to know that. But by saying it out loud and having control over it, I'm like, oh, it's not as bad as it seems. Has anyone had questions specifically to, I know we're going to wait till the end, but I just didn't know if I've missed anything. I can't see a question mark. Oh, Someone's spending it on memories. £300 plus for a Slayer ticket. Great.
Got about another 5 minutes, April, until your time's up. But if there's anything
Brilliant.
else you want to get across,
someone's a Swiftie.
I think we're going to have some questions at the end pulled together.
Okay. I think that kind of covers it with me, if I'm honest. It was quite exposing to realize over these last few months, because I've witnessed me do it, that I'm spending money so people like me and so people don't think I'm a burden. So when I've had a bad episode and someone's witnessed that, or I've messed up at work because I've had a bad episode, I'm not obvious with it, but I'm like, oh, we should go out for dinner, and then pay for dinner, like when they're at the toilet, when they're in the toilet or something. So that was and I thank this webinar for bringing that to my attention. It did make me a little bit sad, but at the same time, I would rather be like this than spend my money on something different. To conclude, thank you.
Thank you, April. Really appreciate that. I think Molly's going to collate some questions at the end. So we're going to hand over to Leah now. Leah, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks so much, April. It's really interesting because I had a base kind of script that I was going to use today because it's a subject that I have written about and talked about quite a lot. But I kind of would rather actually just try and be a bit more upfront and ad lib, because a lot of the stuff that you're saying has really, really resonated with me. And I think if I'm really honest with myself, a lot of the time I talk about, what it's like to be stable, but I've had a really rough patch recently, and you're always learning with this condition. So I think it's quite interesting to reflect on how I'm still, I don't know, slipping up, or where the condition is still showing itself. So my background is I'm actually a consumer, a money journalist. I'm a money editor for a national paper, and my focus is on everyday spending. So I don't write about business. I don't write for the business pages. I write about people saving money on everyday stuff, which is interesting because in some ways I'm brilliant with money, and in some ways I'm absolutely terrible. So I'll be chasing around for the best deal on something, but then I will overspend in the pursuit of that. So I'll buy, because I'm constantly searching for the best deals on stuff for my work, I'm therefore constantly triggered to buy things. Oh, that's a brilliant deal. That's not saving money if you're buying things that you wouldn't have otherwise bought. Also, I think I overcomplicate my finances. I've got too many accounts and things to keep track of, because I'm constantly switching around trying to find the best deal and then forgetting to close this or that. So one thing, in case I forget to mention it later, I know April mentioned Monzo, which is really good. There are also some really good free budgeting apps, and I have to say I don't use them. I probably should, but I know from investigating that they can be really useful for spotting things like unwanted subscriptions, because I think like one thing is really easy to do is to think, oh, that's a great deal, sign up, and then before you know it, you haven't spotted that $6.99 is coming out of your account every single month, especially if you've done it on your phone, so it's coming up from your phone bill rather than your bank account. So there's apps like Snoop, SNOOP, this is in the UK, and Emma, another one. They've all got free versions, and they can help you weed out those kind of like unwanted subscriptions that you might sign up to. So the major kind of breakdown period in my life was just under a decade ago, when I was first diagnosed with bipolar. And during that period, that was when I had the most extreme kind of manic spending. Before and after I was sectioned, because in the run-up I was hypomanic and then manic, and then I got sectioned, and then afterwards, I was in hospital for about 2 weeks, and after that there was an ongoing period of I suppose hypomania, so not full-blown mania, but I was still very much in that highly kind of stimulated, very like giving money away, very much wanting to give money, you know, a lot to homeless people, etc., which is obviously great, but you know, it was just kind of lacking a kind of control element. And also spending on schemes, and it was this sense of like this sense of confidence in my own ideas and feeling that I would just ride this out, and I needed to invest in my ideas and my creativity to keep things going. So I'd be buying loads and loads of stuff from charity shops, and my schemes and ideas were very, very kind of scattered and piecemeal, and there was kind of a strange logic to it, but it wasn't really rational. It wasn't rational spending. It was kind of spending to fuel this kind of bubble of creativity and confidence that I had. But that period, the reason I go back to that period of time is that because I was off work for about 6 to 8 months afterwards, that meant that I kind of calculate that period cost me about £25,000, and that's in a combination of overspending and also loss of income through having to, I ended up having to give up that job. I was working on a different national newspaper at the time. And during that period, my parents kind of had to confiscate my cards when I was in hospital. They didn't give them back to me for a little while afterwards. And then, you know, my mum had to kind of pretty much sort of like bail me out of some of the overspending, and I kind of moved back in with her, and I was able to live rent-free with her for a period until I was able to start working again, which, you know, if it hadn't been for that, you know, I could easily see, if I hadn't had that family safety net, how that could have led to homelessness 100%. But to reflect on kind of more recent behaviors and things that I think I still do, really interesting what April was saying, because I haven't really acknowledged that in myself as well, but it's definitely something I do. So for example, about a month ago, I've been kind of experiencing burnout at work. I had to have a bit of time off because of that recently, and this was sort of triggering some hypomanic symptoms in me, because I was feeling kind of at breaking point. And we went out for a night with colleagues. We don't often socialize that much, and I ended up kind of footing the bill for about 6 bottles of wine. I think I spent about £300 and kind of refused to accept any money off anyone. And it's that kind of sense of, I never want to feel that awkwardness of waiting for who's going to pay, but also I'd always rather be considered in the eyes of other people the generous one rather than the one who never buys around. So I will go above and beyond. And it's almost, I think it is a self-esteem thing, definitely. And I do that with family, with my sister as well. We've had we were living together for quite a while. My dad was ill with he was terminally ill with cancer in 2020 through lockdown. And you know, I can just remember just after he died, it was like we were he died in January 2021, and we were, you know, dealing with the funeral and all these other things, but we'd also both had to be in lockdown in the home with COVID just after he died. And it was kind of like, right, I was buying everybody clothes on ASOS because we needed to be cozy and we needed to kind of get through things, but it was always just picking up the tab and just kind of spending my way out of situations. And I guess because I have had you know, a stable job, I've had the capacity to do that, but sometimes I don't really ask myself, well, is it fair that I'm always doing that, or is it the right thing to do? Or yeah, so I think that's definitely something that I would look at. And there's also, I think sometimes there's a overspending for the comfort factor, because when you're not very well, you're much more likely to want to kind of buy takeaways, or say, actually, I don't want to sit at home or make dinner at home. I want to go out. I want to be out in the world. And that all comes at a big cost when you add it all up. Or buying Ubers or things like that. It's convenience, and it's that kind of restlessness, and also it's kind of comfort of wanting to ease your mood by avoiding inconvenience or avoiding situations that might depress you, I suppose. So that's definitely how I'd say it really affects me still. And yeah, I think I'm constantly trying to find new strategies. I think I know Thomas is particularly good on this side of things. So, but I would say definitely those apps can be really useful. And what April's suggesting around pots was one of the things I was going to mention. There are also, yeah, a lot of apps that will allow you to do that. So I think Hyperjar is another one. You can kind of literally divide your money up digitally. And other people find sometimes manually handling things with cash and kind of actual physical pots sometimes helps, but it's increasingly hard, because I think you do tend to find that a lot of places you kind of have to pay with cards now. So I think that doesn't help. Maybe if you're in a manic period, perhaps deleting your if you know you're overspending, perhaps deleting your cards from Apple Wallet would be something that would probably help me. I think that kind of ease of just there being no spending limit with Apple Wallet, and you can just tap on your phone so easily. There's no chance to kind of think and stop and think and kind of before you make an impulse purchase, when you've got that on your phone with you all the time. So strategies like that, anything that creates a bit of friction, a bit of slow down, and just a chance to kind of think and reflect, it takes away that sort of chasing the dopamine, chasing the serotonin hit that you often get from that buzz from shopping or making a purchase. We used to joke, actually, in lockdown, my sister and I, when we were going through all this stuff with my dad, how one of the things we really, really missed was just transactions. And it's stupid, but it was like, because there was nowhere to go for coffee or anything nearby, it was kind of like going to the supermarket would end up feeling like such a buzz, because it was just we weren't getting that day-to-day thing. But I think a lot of the time spending money, you're doing that because you want an interaction. So I often find I'll buy coffee out, and it's not just about buying coffee, it's because I want to have that conversation, or I want to get out of the house and do something. So I think acknowledging that, or finding other ways of feeding that need, to have that kind of social transaction with people, as well as like financial transaction, can sometimes help as well. Just gonna have a quick, oh no, I won't look at the questions yet, because I know that's being dealt with later. So that's all really, and I'll hand back to Dr. Thomas, and hopefully pick up questions later if there are any.
Thank you, Leah. I really appreciate that, and no need for the formal doctor stuff. I've realised it comes up in my title, but that's just because it's a university account. So
I just call you Dr. Tom normally.
Just call me Tom. Tom. So thank you both. I really appreciate that. And I'm going to do a brief presentation just about what my research has shown. But I think it's worth saying that both of the things you've said really chime with my research, which is always nice to hear that, you know, my research seems to be picking up on something in the real world. So you talked about self-esteem and comfort spending. That's absolutely something I'll talk about and have found in my research. Leah, and then April, you were saying about spending on others, and that's exactly what I found in my research. So I'm a clinical psychologist. So I was working in the UK National Health Service, in the mental health service, but I'm at the University of Southampton now. And so I do a lot about psychological therapy for bipolar. CBT. But my two big research interests are really bipolar disorder and the link between money and mental health problems. So this is a beautiful combination of both of those. And it's something I've been researching for a few years now. And I have lived experience of bipolar myself. So this is at a personal level. And it's one of those things, I think, where everyone with bipolar knows that impulsive spending is a problem. Carers know it. Mental health professionals know it. But there's not actually that much research about why people spend and that kind of thing. So I'm just going to do a brief overview of some of the stuff my research has shown so far. Okay, can you see that, Leah, April? Is that? Yeah, okay. So this that's my contact details. If you ever want to get in touch, I'm always looking for people to help out with my research. This here, this picture is from a focus group I did about bipolar disorder and money. And, we kind of transcribed the interviews and then put it into a word cloud. And I think that just gives a bit of it's a hard picture, but it's a bit of a picture of all the kind of things that come up when you think about money and about bipolar disorder. So what do we mean by impulsive or compulsive spending? Sometimes those sort of terms are used interchangeably. I mean, really kind of spending more money than you planned, regretting it. There's definitely something about that sense of urgency that I have to buy it right away, buying stuff that you regret. You decide I don't actually need that. Feeling like you can't stop yourself, like it's a little bit out of your control. And often there's something about feeling very emotional as well. So it does come up a lot in mania, and in the diagnostic criteria for mania, impulsive activities like more socializing or changes in your sexual activity, but also impulsive spending are listed as one of the impulsive things that can happen when people are manic. But as we'll go on to see, it's not just about mania. It can be linked to kind of depression and anxiety as well. So, but that emotion-driven spending, feeling very emotionally, you might kind of spend. So, like Leah and April were talking about, you're out on a night out and you're quite excited, and maybe that helps fuel it. And maybe that's the case for everyone, but it's kind of amplified, I think, to bipolar. So yeah, it's listed as a possible symptom. And this is some research I'm doing at the moment. We've got a survey of about 500 people. If any of you were the people who helped fill out the survey, thank you very much. So 82% of people said they reported impulsively spending when they were hypomanic. But actually quite a lot, 63% said they do it when they're depressed as well. It was not just about the mania. And something I'm increasingly interested in, and was talked about the kind of going cashless post-COVID by April and Leah. 80% felt that technology made it easier to overspend because your apps, your websites can save your card details. You can buy stuff contactless. It maybe doesn't feel like it's real money. So I think the whole world has gone frictionless for spending, making it as frictionless as possible, which is great for most people. But if you're prone to impulsive spending, that's a bit of a nightmare. Unfortunately, we know as well, some research I'm doing, that people with bipolar do tend to have high rates of bankruptcy. And I know some people have bravely said in the comments that they unfortunately have gone that way as well. So this is when we've interviewed people about like what is the link between money and mental health, not just impulsive spending. We found a few kind of themes here. So overspending and impulsive shopping. So impulsive purchases, I'll spend all the money I have. But there was this theme, which is absolutely what Leah and April were talking about there, about excessive generosity, we called it. So some people saying they gave all their money to charity, or they shower their loved ones with gifts. People saying that they can feel quite anxious or quite depressed when they realize kind of how much they've spent and the debt. They might even feel suicidal. And there's quite a lot of regret that can come, like, why have I done this? What have I done? That kind of thing. It's very easy to avoid things that make us anxious. Why would money be any different? So I think if people are feeling very anxious or depressed, it's easy not to look at that bank balance and not to try and budget, because it's just, you're avoiding it, or it feels too much to kind of do a budget, that kind of thing. So avoiding can be something that maybe keeps those money problems going. And there can be, unfortunately, a bit of a vicious cycle where, this quote here, I realize I'm spending and put my family in financial stress, and then I comfort spend to cope with that, so it can backfire. There was the comment as well about poor employment, and, if you are struggling with your mental health, it might be hard to hold down a job or to have something that's full-time. You might have to take, lower paid work or unreliable, and that obviously has an impact. But there was this theme of comfort spending as well, which is certainly what April was talking about. So this is like different. It's not about manic spending. This is like when people are stressed, or they're anxious, or they're feeling down. So we kind of mapped out how we felt money kind of linked to the mood cycle in bipolar, and what we think happens. And I appreciate your thoughts about if this fits with your experiences. It might not. People, are manic, they overspend, and then when their mood starts to crash, they kind of regret it. They feel quite guilty. There might be some shame, and they feel quite anxious and depressed, and then they kind of shut themselves away and avoid. I think what might happen is people avoid taking things back because they feel guilty or ashamed about what they've bought, trying to get a refund. So I think that's one tip, is trying to take stuff back, because most of the time you can. If you're doing it online, no one's going to ask why, just send it back. And then there's the comfort spending, which maybe brings people back to time one. We also did some research over time where we gave people measures of mental health and also some psychological variables, and we saw what predicted impulsive spending over time in bipolar. So this is the map we've come out with. I appreciate it's a little bit complicated, bear with me. Psychologists like me like lots of boxes and circles. So what we were saying for impulsive spending is that people with bipolar, and there's a few comments in there about this. There was someone there saying, I can't remember your name, sorry, about feeling like they were going to get transferred money by Barack Obama. And we know that even when people are stable with bipolar, they can have very high standards and big ideas, big goals, quite ambitious. And when you're manic, that goes even higher. And we found that those beliefs around I need to achieve, they actually kind of predicted impulsive spending. And what I think is happening is that people have a plan to make money, and then their mood goes up and they impulsively spend. So we actually found that people who were struggling to pay the bills were more likely to impulsively spend. So what I think is happening, and let me know if this fits with your experiences, is that sometimes people get a big idea and it's kind of a get rich quick scheme. It's trying to dig themselves out of a hole. And I come from a middle class background. I've had lots of privileges, but when I was 18 and I was hospitalized for mania, my dad had been made redundant and I was about to start university. So I was worried about money, and I came up with this impulsive idea about a big over-the-top business scheme that was going to make money and help other people. So I was spending money to make money. It didn't work, it backfired. But I think often there's reasons for it. That's the first thing. It's not always whatever looks pretty or shiny. I think sometimes there's a function behind it, a big plan, even if that's an overly ambitious plan. So I bought I'm a drummer, but I bought loads of big African djembe drums, which might seem random, but for me, it was part of the business idea because it was a recording studio. It made sense at the time. In retrospect, it didn't. But then there's also, if you're struggling to pay and you can't go with nice things and new clothes, it does lower your self-esteem, which is something Leah sort of talked about. It kind of knocks your confidence. That might make you feel a bit down, a bit anxious. And there's two things here. We found that mindfulness, people who are less mindful, less aware, were more likely to impulsively spend. So that's one tip I'll talk about, is mindfulness might help you be a little bit more on top of the impulsive spending, and I'll share some resources. But also there's this comfort spending. So that's another practical tip from this. Yes, spending stuff might make you feel good short term. It's probably going to backfire. What else can you do that doesn't involve money that will help you feel good? Even if it's just ringing your friends rather than going out with them because that costs money, or having them over for dinner rather than going out, or, you know, relaxation, or having a, you know, watching some comedy or something like that that takes the edge off that depression or anxiety for a little bit, but doesn't involve money, right? Scratch the itch in the same way, but you don't end up regretting it. And then finally, so it's complicated. This is just for bipolar and just for impulsive spending, and this is all the factors. We also found a cycle where people regret spending. They worry about the impact on others, like their family, and then they kind of excessively generous as a way to compensate. I remember someone saying to me before, you know, their partner got annoyed at the credit card bill, and then they said, look, I bought you this shiny thing. Oh, okay. So there's a lot of things going on. It is complicated. I think I'm not trying to make light of it here, but I saw this cartoon, which I think summarizes my complicated model a lot better than I could. And I've actually got this printed on the office of my wall at the university. I think that's often the case. You're worried about finances, and it is a bit of a, well, let's take our mind off it. We'll worry about it tomorrow. We've done some research about what the change, and we're doing more about this actually, and we'll have a new survey going live soon. So email me if you're interested. A lot of people saying that they would like technology that makes it harder to spend. There are gambling blockers for a number of banks in the UK, at least. What I'm trying to work on is think about trying to develop some technology to try and detect if you're manic. To maybe pause your bank account, because the problem is that when you're manic, you don't know you're manic, right? So you're not going to self-freeze your accounts because you think you've got a great idea. You know, I always describe mania being like, you know, the winning numbers to the lottery, you just need to buy that ticket. So I think I'm going to try and develop some ways where actually maybe your mobile phone can detect if you're starting to get manic, and try and pause some transactions, freeze them for 24 hours. That's what I'm working on with the computer science people. There are lots of people saying that actually creditors, they don't want to be lent as much money. They're lent too much money by the banks. So in terms of just some practical tips, and we can talk about this because we've got time for kind of questions and discussion after this. I mean, I'm not sure what it's like in other countries. I know we've got an international group here. Welcome all, wherever you are. In the UK, at least, you are considered a vulnerable customer if you have bipolar disorder. They should be able to treat you differently. They should take that into account. They can't use it to, you know, deny you a loan, for example. But if you're in debt and you're struggling to pay and you have a mental health problem that impacts it, they need to take that into account. Okay, so do consider whether you could tell them. There's loads of great debt advice in the UK, like Citizens Advice, Step Change, and Christians Against Poverty, which is all completely free, impartial debt advice. If you are under the care of like a nurse or a psychologist or a psychiatrist or even your GP, and your debt is impacting your mental health and your mental health is impacting your debt, they can fill out a form. You just Google it. It's a very quick form to say this and send it to the creditors, and then hopefully they will take that into account. There's also, if you do end up in, if you end up in a crisis team in the UK or in a hospital, there's also something called a breathing space, which the mental health team should be able to start, which means that for the period you're in a mental health crisis, you can't be sent any debt collection letters, you can't be charged interest, etc. So that's really good. Basically, everyone has to pause and back off until you're better. I think removing apps where it makes it easier to impulsively spend, right? If you've got like Amazon or that kind of thing, do you really want, when the website says, do you remember your credit card details? Consider saying no, because it's all about positive friction. And actually, if you can just click it on your phone with Face ID or whatever, that's a lot easier to do it. If you have to go and actually get your credit card and put in the credit card details again, by the time you've done that, you might go, you know what, I don't need this. So anything, any apps where you spend a lot on, do you really need them? Do you need the website to save your card details? And I think just being careful about contactless payments, like if you've got a smartwatch like I do you need that? It is difficult when a lot of, society has gone cashless, but, if places do accept cash, just take cash out, if you are kind of worried. There are also, you can kind of put, for a lot of smartphones, you can put limits on your phone. So like you're only allowed to spend a certain number of time on, a shopping app, for example. So it's worth putting that on. One top tip I've got one as well, because I think smartphones are really a problem for impulsive spending, right? And most people with bipolar agree. Get yourself a really cheap, basic, old 90s brick Nokia, right? Okay, and keep it in your bedside table with 10 quid of credit on. And then if you're really manic, and you add some key numbers on there, family, friends, mental health professionals, right? If you're really manic, you have that. People can contact you, you can contact them, but you can't impulsively spend. You can't go putting loads of stuff on social media that you're going to regret. It's just a purely communication thing, and to have that. So I've done that before when I'm manic. I just use a basic phone. I'm going to say about mindfulness, I'm going to share some resources, and the urge to spend comes and goes. It waxes and wanes quite quickly. So actually just using mindfulness just to notice that urge, actually you can sort of ride that wave. And I've used mindfulness with urge surfing for all sorts of things. Urges to use drugs, and impulsive spending is part of that. And there's some other organizations as well, Money and Mental Health Advice, which has got some budgeting apps specifically designed for people with mental health problems. There is I think it only works for desktops, not phones, like laptops or desktops, but there is something where you install a plugin and then it turns your shopping basket into an icebox where you have to it freezes the transaction for an hour. April likes the sound of that from her expression. So you have to pause it and wait to it for an hour. And then finally, some free mindfulness exercises that I did when I was in the NHS. There's the link there. You can just search mindfulness exercises for everyday life. There are some various kind of mindfulness exercises there which can really help, I think, surf that urge to spend. If you're really noticing, you're thinking about, I've got to buy something, try to use mindfulness just to sit with it. And it's a great way to just be more aware of your mental health anyway. So that's about me. I mean, my final plug, I would really appreciate it. So this is as part of me trying to develop some technology to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. I have a doctorate student who's doing some research about impulsive spending. So this will probably take about an hour of your time. It's doing some online tests about your memory and attention span, that kind of thing. Some sort of cognitive tests. Or you can do it on a phone or on a laptop is probably better, or a computer if you've got one. And then we're just seeing if that predicts impulsive spending. So we're doing a final push for recruitment over the next week or so. If anyone wants to take part, an hour of their time, we'd really appreciate that. Okay, I hope that's been helpful. I'll put that link in the chat. And yeah, Leah and April, thank you. I think I'm hoping some of the stuff I talked about resonates with your experiences and everyone else on the call. Molly, have we got some questions that keep coming up?
Hello. Yeah, we do. We have so many questions, actually. So I wanted to thank everyone so much for joining in and asking questions. I also wanted to thank everyone for being so open and sharing their own experiences. I know, all of us here are members of our community, and I think it's so important and so helpful to be able to hear that you're not alone in having some of the experiences that you may have had. I also, before I start on the questions, wanted to go over a couple of things. There are a few questions about people's individual financial needs. And so I put a link to a few different money management organizations in the chat. And also a few people sharing their individual experiences of bipolar and wanting to support with that. So Just as a note, you're welcome to send us an email at info@bipolaruk.org. The same is true if your question isn't answered today. You can email us, and you can also use our e-community. It will be available directly after this for you to sign up and select to meet other people affected by the condition in the same or similar ways as yourself. So I was noting down questions and I tried to group them together. And unsurprisingly, all of you talked a lot about the relationship between emotion and overspending. And so the first few questions are about that specifically. So the first is, how do you manage feelings of loss, emptiness, or regret after overspending? And you're welcome to all unmute and kind of answer in any way you feel comfortable with.
Well, I mean, I just want to say that the numbers I shared there about just how common it is, I hope you can take a little bit of solace in that you're not alone. This is a very common, it's more common than not in bipolar. So I don't want you to be hard about that on yourself. And actually, you know, I would consider, if you're trying to get a refund, saying I was unwell, and people will probably listen to that. If you look at like legal court stuff about people who have gone bankrupt, there's a lot of stuff about bipolar. So, you know, creditors, if they're saying you can't get out of this contract, I'd consider saying I'm actually bipolar, and they might listen to you differently, you know. But yeah, just remind yourself you're not alone. Yeah.
Thank you. That's lovely. Leah or April, I don't know if you have any kind of tips or anything that's helped that you'd want to share.
I was just going to add to what Tom said about definitely with creditors and financial companies and things like even like utility companies, energy companies, people you deal with. I definitely think it's worth when you do run into those problems saying that you've got bipolar and trying and getting them to acknowledge that you're in the vulnerable category. I've used it myself when it's come to, for example, HMRC. One of the years when I had my big breakdown, I couldn't get my tax bill in time for 31st of January, self-assessment tax bill. And so I was in touch with them. I shared my hospital note immediately and was like, I'm not going to get this done. And they were actually really good. So, I mean, you'll struggle to get through to them, but you put it on the record, put it in writing, put something in there, and there are really strong rules around financial companies and how they deal with people. So definitely make the most of those.
Thank you. April.
I would suggest listening to Thomas and Leah. It's what I tend to do is I call my mum again, I say what's happened, and then I tell her what my train of thought was as to why I ended up buying that. So if you have someone in your life that can do that, I'm very fortunate. I've got parents that will pick up the phone to me at any minute of the day. And then I try and explain it. And then it's not necessarily, you know, needing someone to go, oh, then it's fine, don't worry, pat on the back. But it's then they're holding me accountable that that's my train of thought. So then next time I have these feelings, you know which things to be listening out for, so we don't end up in this situation again.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. And actually, almost like you can read my mind, April leads really well onto our next question. There was a few people in the audience who shared that they're a loved one of somebody with the diagnosis. And so the question is, when someone you care about is overspending or struggling to manage their spending as part of their diagnosis, have you found any support tips that you'd like to share that have been helpful for you that other people might be able to utilize?
Yeah, and there was a comment there I saw about like power of attorney. I think you know, there was something about Bipolar Care was sharing about advanced care plans. I think the key here, if you're a carer, because I know it's a big stress for yourself as well, is trying to agree a plan when they are well, trying to agree a plan when they were stable. If they've got a relapse prevention plan, adding money into that and having something actually written and agreed. This is a red line in terms of spending, and this is what we're going to do, like, you know, a basic smartphone, that kind of thing. I mean, there's often the suggestion of like, my partner can hold on to the credit card. It's a good idea in theory, but when someone's manic, that could get messy if they really want the card, right? So I think be careful. But I think the key thing is, agree when they're well what is the best thing to do. And I know when it's manic, it's hard for people to take advice on, but they're going to get a better buy-in and listen if you go, look, this is why I'm worried. We said if you were buying XYZ, that we were going to do this plan and we were going to pause for 24 hours. And that's going to get a bit better of buy-in. I think that's something worth saying that on my research shows, I think there's often a theme. There's a pattern in spending. I'm doing more research on it, but I think people will often spend on the same thing. So that's something that might be useful for yourself and for carers. You know, for me, it would be if I went and bought loads of musical instruments. Big red flag. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Leah. April, I didn't know if you had anything else you wanted to add.
The pattern thing is interesting, I think. And I saw someone in the comments mention hoarding and buying extras of stuff. I definitely do this. It's buying shoes, and I'm worried that they won't. If I find a really perfect pair of shoes, I'm like, they're gonna wear out, and then but then it's when I have these reckonings, when I do these huge clear outs, and I realise that I've accumulated stuff, or toiletries and things like that. So yeah, I think with a lot of these things, it's self-awareness and just trying to go over your patterns and trying to kind of look for patterns in your behavior and sort of trying to note them down. I find like the having to have a clear out and acknowledge that I've built up this much stuff, that somehow, although we talk about the guilt, it's also quite helpful to have that guilt, because when you feel like guilty about having accumulated things, sometimes that can help you to be more aware of it in future, I suppose, as well.
Thank you. And April, I know you shared a few things previously, but I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to add.
No, I think they covered it. I'll take the next one.
I just want to say on that note, I mean, I think one thing that's worth thinking about is, you know, like I was saying, what am I getting out of this? And, you know, there were lots of comments about excessively generous, right? Showing people you appreciate them, showing you the care. So I think it's really simple as, how can I show people I care without spending money, right? Bake them a cake. There's a lot of stuff about helping people, you know, helping others. Can you volunteer your time at a charity shop rather than the person who commented that they went and spent money in a charity shop? You know, that kind of thing, right? Can I bake a cake for my neighbor rather than buying them a gift? You know it, don't you? You appreciate those actions and gestures rather than gifts more sometimes, don't you? So I think that's worth thinking. And if it makes myself feel better to buy stuff, well, what can I do that doesn't involve money that makes myself feel better? Whether that's going for a really intense session at the gym, or, you know, or doing some gaming, whatever it is that just takes the edge off you.
Thank you, all of you. I know we're due to finish at 7, but I think we can squeeze in one last question. A lot of people in the chat were talking about upcoming triggering events, so Black Friday, Christmas, January sales, all that kind of thing. And so the next question is, do you have any practical or kind of emotional tips for planning ahead to protect your finances when you know that triggering events related to overspending are coming up?
Yeah, no, it is difficult. I think trying to have a list of what you really need to buy versus what you'd like to buy, and maybe saying the like to buy stuff to a wish list rather than that. I think that the truth is, to be honest, these Black Friday deals, they always say they're good deals, but they're not usually good deals. I mean, Leah, you might correct me here, but often they're not actually that good, are they? And I think that's important to remind yourself about.
We've actually got some research that we're probably writing up for this weekend, which is around the fact that if you look in these price tracker apps, quite often retailers are sneakily putting up prices in the months and weeks before Black Friday.
Well, then cut them. That's so cheeky.
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah, they do.
There should be laws against that. Jesus.
Well, there are. They just, you know. Well, no, then yeah, vague enough that they get skirted around, you know. So yeah, no, you're right, and I think unsubscribing from email marketing lists probably be a good thing as well, and watching who you're following on Instagram, etc.
Yeah. And keep busy on Black Friday. Put your phone down.
Yeah.
Shove it down the side of the sofa, turn the internet off, watch some TV, or go out, do something else so you're not mindlessly scrolling.
I mean, I'm an absolute sucker for it, and I'm planning on doing all of my Christmas shopping on those 2 days, if I'm honest. But also, if you're not American, like, I mean, it's part of the American holiday, so it's like, it's none of our business. What I also do now actually is similar to what you just said there, Tom, especially like on things like ASOS or like, I don't know, Amazon, you can have your own wish list, which is useful. But when I've just got an urge to like buy clothes, I'll just go on ASOS and I'll like everything, so I feel like I'm actually, a part of it. And then and it's so funny because my friends are like, you've gone the opposite. You faff around so much that things become more expensive by the time that you need to pay for them. But I'd rather be that. So I'll just go through shopping websites, like everything, leave it there, because I bet your bottom dollar in 2 days' time, when you look back, you're going to be like, that won't suit me. And you've saved yourself some money.
And it's worth reminding, they employ psychologists like me to try and rope you in. So when you're on a website and it says, only 5 left, 20 people have bought this in the last hour, that is specifically trying to get you to go, oh, I've got to buy it now. So just remind yourself, they want me to buy it now. Mm-hmm. Do I have to buy it now? Probably still going to be there tomorrow.
Yeah. Voucher has just been wrapped by the regulator today about, well, they're looking into it, but it's exactly that. It's that kind of X many tickets left or whatever, and the accusation is that they're actually not in limited supply. They just make you feel that they are.
Thank you so much, everyone, for all of your comments. Thank you, Leah, Thomas, and April, so much for sharing.